Hi, Joshua here with Truth and Mercy Baptist Ministries. Is Easter a mistranslation in Acts chapter 12? Shouldn't the King James have translated it as Passover, as many other versions have done? On the contrary, the King James is the only version I know of in modern times that actually gets it right at this passage. Easter is not a mistranslation, for at least two reasons. Let's read the passage and break it down. Acts chapter 12, first four verses say, "Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and to kill James, the brother of John, with the sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread." It says this in parentheses because it's pointing out that these are the days during which he took Peter, the days of unleavened bread. That's when he took him. Verse 4, "And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people." Now, the Greek word here translated Easter in the King James and Passover in many other versions is Pascha. And by translating Pascha as Passover, like the new versions do, many modern Bible translators not only demonstrate their lack of knowledge of Greek in context, but they also demonstrate a profound ignorance of English. First, if you read Numbers 28, verses 16 and 17, you find an important chronological fact. Passover feast comes before the days of unleavened bread. So how could Herod have taken Peter during the days of unleavened bread and then determined to kill him after Passover? That's backwards. Verse 16 of Numbers 28 says, "And in the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Lord, and in the 15th day, the next day, is the feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten." So the Passover feast came first, then the days of unleavened bread. In fact, the Bible never refers to those days of unleavened bread as the Passover. The Passover refers only to the eating of the sacrificial lamb. That is the feast of Passover. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is part of the overall feast, but it is never referred to as the Passover. Yet Acts says that Herod took Peter during the days of unleavened bread, which means that Passover was already over, and that he determined to kill him later. So it wouldn't have made any sense to say Passover here in this passage, because he was still waiting for his feast, which was Easter, during this period of unleavened bread. He wasn't waiting for the Passover to come because it was already over with in the days of unleavened bread. Clearly, what happened was this. Passover took place, then Peter was arrested during the days of unleavened bread, and immediately following this, Herod was planning on killing him after his own pagan feast of Ishtar, or Easter. Passover could not be the proper word in this passage here. The King James got it right with Easter. Secondly, the man who invented the word Passover really should be an authority on the subject of when to use it, and he didn't use it in this passage. The word Passover was invented by William Tyndale, from whom we get much of the wording of the King James Bible, including Acts12's translation of Pascha, Easter. So if Pascha, the Greek word in this passage, should be translated as Passover, wouldn't he have known, being the inventor of the very word Passover? Why didn't he use it here? Obviously, Easter is the right word, not Passover, and he would know this because Tyndale knew it would be inaccurate to use the very word he created in this passage, since Passover was already over with and we were now in the time of unleavened bread. He and the translators of the King James, who relied very much on his wording, chose Easter for very good reason. Now, it must be pointed out that throughout history, prior to the invention of the word Passover, it is true that both the biblical feast of Passover and the pagan feast of Easter, which generally occurred around the same period of time, within the same week or two, were often referred to by the same word, Pascha, which essentially just means spring festival. And it didn't necessarily distinguish which festival you were talking about, the biblical Passover or the pagan Ishtar feast or Easter. And likewise, Easter, the word Easter also came to be used to refer to any spring feast, either the Christian one or the pagan one. And this is why Tyndale had to invent a new word to allow for more specificity between the Hebrew celebration of Passover and the pagan celebration of the Feast of Ishtar, or Easter. An article which appeared in the Trinitarian Bible Society Quarterly Record explains this further. Quote, when Tyndale applied his talents to the translation of the New Testament from Greek into English, he was not satisfied with the use of a completely foreign word, and decided to take into account the fact that the season of the Passover was known generally to English people as Easter. Tyndale has Esther or Easter 14 times in his previous translation work, Esther Lamb 11 times, Esther Fest once, and Paschal Lamb 3 times. When he began his translation of the Pentateuch, he was again faced with the problem in Exodus 12:11 and 21 other places. And no doubt, recognizing the Easter in this context would be an anachronism. That means a chronological error. Remember, Passover comes before the days of unleavened bread. And so, to continue with the quote, he coined a new word, Passover, and used it consistently in all 22 places, that is, except for in this location where he translated it Easter. It is therefore to Tyndale that our language is indebted for this meaningful and appropriate word. So yes, before Tyndale, Pascha could refer either to the Passover or Easter, and early English translations use the word Easter here to refer to or Passover in the Old Testament. But when Tyndale invented a new word to be able to distinguish between them, it became easier to know if we were discussing Passover or Easter, a Hebrew celebration or a pagan one. And he himself, in this passage, in Acts 12, chose to translate Pascha in this passage as Easter, not his own word, Passover, because he understood that in the context it was referring to the pagan celebration. Because, after all, Herod did not celebrate the Passover. Yes, he was king of the Jews, but he was an Idumean. He was a pagan impostor sitting in the throne of David. He celebrated Ishtar, Easter, the pagan alternative to the biblical feast. And he intended to kill Peter after his pagan festival. The King James rightly translated this as Easter. The Bible, the King James Bible, has no errors, no mistranslations, and no contradictions, and you can take that to the bank. I hope that this was enlightening to you, and I hope that it built your faith in the Word of God as something that you can stand on. If you have any suggestions for future contradictions you'd like to see us tackle, let us know in the comments. God bless.